Hey everybody, welcome back to the Zenith Super Duty build. We are making really good progress. Now I started filming this video a week or so ago, and so I'm going to include that footage, but then kind of jump in here now and again to give you an update on where I'm at right now. So let's get started with what I filmed a while ago. I thought I'd show you how I'm painting my gear. And I've been trying to come up with a way to do this without hanging the gear. Because if I hang the gear, I have to paint part of it upside down. And I thought about hanging it from this little structure I have here. And if I did, I would probably want to reinforce this a little bit, just because this 2x4 is only sitting on here with, I think, one screw on the top holding it. I didn't need it to be that strong because I was just hanging the doors or the door frames from those chains. Now, since I didn't want to hang the gear, I've come up with a method that I think works well, and I don't have to paint upside down. So let me explain what I did here. And I did this with the primer, and it worked perfect. And now I think I can do it with the paint, and it will work perfect. I first had this gear upside down on these two pieces of wood, and I painted basically the inside of the gear. And then once that was dry, I flipped the gear upside down and I primed, I think I said painted before, I meant primed, the top. So then I let that dry, and then the gear was fully primed. Now what I'm doing again for the paint is I've painted just this section right here. And I did this about 3 or 4 days ago, so it's perfectly dry. So what I can do is, with that being dry, and the landing gear sitting just as it is now, I'm going to paint from here down to about here on both sides. And I'll get as much as the sides and the corners I can there. So that'll be painted, that will be painted. But remember, this section here is dry. So after I have this painted and that painted, I can flip the gear upside down, and it'll still be sitting on these 2x4s, but remember, this part is dry. And then I can finish painting just the very edge here, and then I can paint the entire bottom, and then it'll just sit on the dry spot here to dry for a few days. And then, you know, I'm a little concerned about how this will blend in right here. I think because this paint isn't glossy, it's a kind of a semi-gloss, I think it'll blend in pretty nice. And even if it doesn't matter, because you only see the gear from here, or, you know, from here that way, and from there that way. You won't see any of this because it'll be up in the channel in the fuselage. So anyway, that's how I'm planning on doing it. So the gear is set up there. This primer's been sitting for about a week, drying. So what you have to do is scuff this up, or I have to scuff this up before I paint it. If you can paint this within like a day of priming, you don't need to do anything, but after it's been curing for a while, you need to scuff it up a little bit. So I need to take care of that, clean it with some alcohol, get it ready for paint. And then in my paint booth here, I will move the cruiser outside, and then I will move the pits outside, just because this is kind of spraying a lot of paint, and I don't want any overspray getting on the airplanes. I have my green paint mixed up. This is the U-Tech U500 single stage paint. You'll notice it's an eggshell. It's not glossy, but it's not flat either. It's somewhere in between. And with this paint, you have the paint and then the hardener, and you'll notice there is no thinner. You don't have to thin this paint at all. It mixes 5-to-1, which if we show you on our paint cup there's our 5-to-1, and I usually just go to the 1. That's what I mixed up now. The bottom 1 is the paint, and then that next little 1 is the hardener. And I am using my cheap little Harbor Freight paint gun, which works absolutely perfect. I'm sure your system would be a little bit different, but what I've been using here is 47 PSI at the wall, and then I have probably 40 feet of hose that goes into the paint booth. I don't know what the pressure is at the gun because I don't have a gauge at the gun, but I've kind of learned that at 47 PSI on the wall, it works perfect. Now let me elaborate just a little bit on the paint pressure here. Now I do know what the pressure is at the gun because I have another paint gun with a gauge on it that I've just put the air hose up to kind of see what the pressure was. And it's 22 PSI at the gun, which is right about where you want it for most primers and paint. But let me kind of tell you how I came up with the 47. And you know, 45 might work fine, 40 might work fine, 50 might work fine. But what I did was I had the pressure turned up for a die grinder. And I just kind of randomly turned the pressure down on the valve and it ended up at 47. And then I hooked my paint gun up to it with some primer and did some test pieces and it came out absolutely beautifully. So I just haven't changed the pressure and that's why it's at 47. If I would have adjusted it to 42 or 51, I would have just left it there. But really the important thing is the pressure at the gun, and that's usually about 20 to 23 or so. Mine's at 22, and that just seems to work perfectly. I also just wanted to add that if you are using this SPI Epoxy primer, I found it to be really good primer. It's very strong, it works great. But in all honesty, almost every epoxy primer is probably exactly the same. But one of the things I just wanted to mention is this one here is a 50-50 mix with the epoxy and the activator. And I found that if I thin it 25% after you mix part A and part B, it works just perfectly. And I'm using this really cheap Harbor Freight paint gum. It has a 1.5 tip and it just, for the primer, it works absolutely perfect. And even for the paint, it's been working perfect. So that's my setup. Well, hopefully you can hear me with my exhaust fan running, but what I've done so far is I've just sprayed one light coat on the top. I'll let this dry for about 15 minutes and spray the second coat, but you'll notice I didn't spray all the way down to the end, and that is just because I need to rotate this and I need a place to grab the gear that's not painted. So there we go. It blends in real nice with that, and again, you can see the difference. There's just one light coat, and that has two coats. But that's what I'm going to do. I'll spray the second coat on there, flip it over, and I'll be able to spray the entire underside all at once. And this is what it looks like when it's done. I have two coats on here, two on the top, two on the bottom. It looks really nice. There's no dust in the paint. It looks perfect. I'm really happy with it. So anyway, there's not much I can do now for probably a couple days because I want to let this really cure before I touch it and move it out of the paint booth. As you can see, I've moved the cruiser out of the booth just to paint, and that frees up a lot of room in the hangar. What I'm going to do now is Gordon is finally getting his Cherokee 6 painted, so he'll have an empty hangar. So I'm going to move the cruiser over to his hangar. That leaves all of this open, and I will move the Super Duty fuselage back into the hangar and get that prepped and ready for primer and paint. The fuselage right now is in my garage, but what I want to do, once I move this into the hangar, I need to tape off all of the black tubes, all of the inside here. I need to remove this top window. You'll notice the side windows are not installed yet. And then basically after that, it's just taking some Scotch-Brite pads and kind of sanding down the entire fuselage to get it scuffed up. Then I'll clean it up real well, and then I can get this painted. And what's nice about having the gear painted is once the fuselage is done, I can put the gear right back on the fuselage, and then you can imagine this sitting in my hangar, fully painted with the gear on it, and then after that, I will start working on all of the tail pieces. Here is an update on the fuselage. I have it primed with that SPI Epoxy primer. It came out absolutely beautifully. There's no dust in the paint. It really looks good. I was going to show you on here, right along the bottom somewhere, I can't find it now, so maybe it came out or something, but there was a little tiny string or piece of fuzz or lint in there, and I think it was from my tack rag, because there was a couple times when I was wiping this down with a tack rag, a rivet would kind of catch it and tear a little string out of it. And I don't know, it was back here, but now I can't find it. But anyway, This is all primed, just waiting for it to dry for a day or so, and then I can start spraying the paint. So, kind of nice to have this part done. I was going to show you how nice this came out, but I think with it being so shiny and smooth, the camera really won't focus on it. But it just came out absolutely perfect. I really don't have a dust problem anymore, and I think that's just from switching paint guns. That little Harbor Freight gun just is amazing. But it's perfectly smooth and there's no dust in the paint. It really looks nice. By the way, I've moved the cruiser out of the hangar. It's over in Gordon's hangar, and I have the pits all covered up here, so just in case any overspray comes out of the booth, it does not land on the pits. You know, to paint the bottom of the airplane, I have a separate paint gun here that has a different system to this cup, which lets you be able to paint any direction. There's kind of a crushable bladder that goes in here instead of a vent hole at the top. There's like a liner that goes in here, and then this piece goes on. And this is what I was going to use to spray the bottom of the airplane. So what I did was I mixed up all my paint, or the primer, and then I was going to use the Harbor Freight gun for everything except the bottom, but I wanted to get this paint gun ready, so I went to get this set up, and I didn't have any more of those crushable inserts that go in here, the part you actually put the primer in, so I could not use this paint gun. So I was kind of wondering what to do. I was thinking maybe I just do the sides and the top and then order more and then come back and do the bottom later. But then I realized this amazing Harbor Freight paint gun, this cup here rotates. So what I did, let me do it this way, is to paint upside down, I just rotated the cup like this, and then I set my fan so that it goes this way instead of this way, and this worked perfect. I was able to paint upside down just like this on the bottom of the plane without any paint spilling out of the cup. Well, with the fuselage primed, the next step is to wait a few days for that to dry, which is okay because I leave for work anyway the day after tomorrow. So once I get back from this next trip, I will be able to paint the green on the fuselage. When that's done, the landing gear is already done and ready to go. I can bolt the landing gear back on the airplane and roll it out of the paint booth. Then I'm going to work on the horizontal stabilizer and the elevator, get those primed and painted. I'll be able to bolt that onto the back of the fuselage, hook up some control cables, hook up the autopilot, and get a whole bunch of other little things done on the fuselage. Then after that, I guess I will work on priming and painting the wing struts. And then finally, I have a little bit of work to do with the wing tips on the wings, but I'll get those done, ready for primer and paint, get the wings painted, and then I can bolt everything together, really finish it up, just leaving the engine to install on the front. Well, guys, that's the progress report from the shop here. If you want, follow along on Facebook. If you have Facebook, I have a Kitplane Enthusiast Facebook page where I'll post pictures every once in a while of stuff I'm priming or painting. It's kind of a little sneak peek before I actually make a video about it. So that's it for now. See you on the next one.